Thank you. Thank you. Wow, could I put all of that on a t-shirt, do you think? That was good. I like that part about wrestling with a story, and that's exactly how it felt to write this book, is to wrestle it down. A lot of people have asked me, why did you write a memoir now? Why'd you decide to write it now? And I said, I didn't decide to write it now, I decided to finish it now. I've been working on it for 10 years, and I finished it earlier this year. I never consciously decided to write a memoir. I thought I was too young to write a memoir. It turns out not to be true. But I had lost my voice in '98. I had vocal polyps, and I lost my voice for 2.5 years. And for someone who had always considered herself first and foremost a writer, I was shocked to discover how devastated I was to lose my singing voice. And my self-esteem kind of fell apart, and I realized my singing voice was central to who I thought I was as well. But the good part of that, I did get my voice back, but the good part is that I developed this little cottage industry of writing essays. And I wrote for Rolling Stone and the New York Times and New York Magazine, the Oxford American, one of the great Southern magazines in existence, and even Martha Stewart Living. And I wrote this piece called The Ties That Bind, about family and music. And it ended up being chosen for this compilation called Best Music Writing 2000. My editor at Viking called me up and he said, that's the beginning of a memoir. That essay's the beginning of a memoir. And I said, I'm too young to write a memoir. And he said, think about several volumes. And then he gave me the work of MFK Fisher, who quickly became one of my favorite writers in the world. And she had this very peripheral way of writing a memoir. She wrote about her life by writing about food. And I thought, I could write about my life by writing about songs. And that was the overarching guiding principle when I was writing this book, is where did the music take me? Who did I meet because of it? What songs did I write because of what happened? Could I talk about the experience and the song? Could I talk about the true love and the song, the journey and the song? And I did. The songs became a great framework for this. And I think the best way to illustrate that is to read the intro to the book. For my entire life, I have been trying to give voice to the rhythms and words that underscore, propel, and inform me. Because my peripheral vision is more acute than my direct powers of observation, and my love of an A minor chord is more charged and refined than my understanding of my own psyche, I have often attempted to explain my experiences to myself through songs. By writing them, singing them, listening to them, deconstructing them, and letting them fill me like food and water. I have charted my life through not only the songs I've composed, but the songs I've discovered, the songs that have been given to me, the songs that are a part of my legacy and ancestry. Through them, I've often found meaning and relief, while at other times, I failed to recognize or understand a rhythm or a theme until it became urgent or ingrained, and I finally came across a song that captured the experience. My life has been circumscribed by music. I have learned more from songs than I ever did from any teacher in school. They are interwoven and have flowed through the most important relationships in my life, with my parents, my husband, and my children. Songs have unfolded in my living room and under the spotlight. For me, music has always involved journeys, both literal and metaphoric. Sometimes I took the journey first and found the song waiting at the destination. Some songs have led me to true love. Occasionally, a song has been only a faint whisper at the periphery of a larger event, though it was always present. Many of my own songs have taken the long way around as I circled the edges of an experience, examining the placement of the furniture or the color of the room, the backbeat and the verses, the chord progression and the melody, constantly roaming and constantly curious. I dream of songs. I dream they fall down through the centuries from my distant ancestors and come to me. I dream of lullabies and sea shanties and keening cries and rhythms and stories and backbeats. I dream of the summer of love and the British invasion and the cries of Appalachia and the sound and soul of the Mississippi Delta. I have resisted so many times correcting public misperceptions about me in my life, out of pride, out of pain, or out of a longing for privacy. But I relish the opportunity to write about my life in this book, not to set any records straight, but to extend the poetry and to find the more subtle melodies and themes in a life that, on reflection, seems much longer than the years I have lived. Documenting one's life in the midst of living it is a strange pursuit. I've always wanted to live as a beginner, and writing a memoir in some ways defies that notion, but I consider this book as a first installment in an ongoing story. I don't know why some memories have persisted while others have faded, but I trust tenacity. So those are the memories I have written about. This is not a chronological fact check of my life, and I'm sure my sisters or my husband or my children remember some of these events very differently. I have abandoned my reliance on the external facts to support an individual truth, and everyone is entitled to his or her own. This is mine. So far, so good. More to come. More is always to come. Well, as I told you, my identification in myself was as a songwriter, and it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer from a much earlier age, but at 18, when I went on the road with my dad shortly after high school, and he gave me the list of songs, which I made the record, the list, based on the real list that he gave me, I decided I wanted to be a songwriter. After getting that list and spending that summer with him, actually it was a 2.5-year tour, it wasn't just a summer, and being with the Carter family and Carl Perkins, who were on the road with him on that tour, and learning guitar from Mother Maybelle and Carl Perkins and Helen Carter, and examining these songs and this legacy, I said, I want to be a songwriter. This is the most honorable profession. And I didn't have any interest in being a performer. I thought I didn't need that much attention. And, my template, which kind of came from my mother's anxiety, was that if you lived the life of a performer, you got addicted to drugs, your marriage broke up, and you were constantly on the road. Who would want to do that? And I had some of that anxiety myself. I had to grow into being a performer, and it was years before I developed an ambition for what I was already doing. And I had a lot of great voices around me to compare myself to unfavorably for a long time. And this little bit of the book is about one of those voices that was around me. One day in 1988, I was lying on my couch in a sleepy reverie as the afternoon sun spilled through the huge bay window in the living room of my log house outside Nashville, when it occurred to me in a sharp, unsettling way that I was a singer. Not only was I a singer, but I sang for a living, which meant that a lot of people who were strangers to me were familiar with my voice without knowing me personally. They might not even know my name, but they had heard and could now recognize the voice, a product of my genes and experience, authentic but extremely personal in my estimation. This was largely how I felt about my voice, that it was undependable, beyond my control, somewhat embarrassing at times, if not too low, then too high, if not too soft, then too loud, or too harsh, or too wimpy. It was simply not enough, not right. And as such, it exposed me far, far more than I could comfortably allow. It presented the perfect conundrum and therefore an irresistible career choice. My ambivalent relationship with my voice certainly had something to do with the fact that thanks to my father's profession, our family was exposed to great singers who were also extraordinary personalities from an early age. My mother, for her part, was a devoted Patsy Cline fan and would say her name with slightly pursed lips, Patsy. No last name needed, vowels squeezed a little by disapproval, but the tight mouth holding back a barely contained thrill. Patsy was wicked and fabulous, when both qualities really meant something, before they became cheap ideas used to market more marginal talents. She was the object of fascination, distrust, and raw, if hidden, admiration, but not judgment. There was nothing to attach judgment to because Patsy did not judge herself. She was too truly and spontaneously alive, too rooted in her body, too in command of a startling sexuality that infused everything, and that was the vehicle for a preternaturally affecting voice that both revealed and obscured her essence. People who have genuine memories of her have become somewhat revisionist in their collective retelling. She was so great, also in the pre-marketing sense of the word, that they have felt almost obliged to polish and repair her wild and willful personality to suit the magnitude of her talent, particularly since she was a woman in an era that did not suffer female unaccountability gladly. I once asked Mom what she remembered about Patsy, not as someone who would have a professional take. For that, I would have asked my dad. But as a woman who had been so deeply affected by her. She laughed, but didn't ask why I had posed the question. I didn't know her well, she admitted, but your daddy and I did have her over to the house not long before she died. She had a mouth like a sailor, and she didn't put on airs. She was just Patsy, comfortable in her skin. I admired that, but that beautiful voice and body were so different from her roughness. Mom paused. I love her singing, she said passionately, present tense. And after considering the matter a while, added, well, she was very friendly. I laughed, my revisionist theory confirmed. Were you disillusioned when you met her, Mom? Well, I wouldn't want that to be said. She was ahead of her time, that's all. There was a quiet pause, then a little sigh. I never got pictures with her. Patsy Cline's gifts were extraordinary enough to have become a profound source of inspiration, even to those of us without immediate memories of her, those of us whose voices weren't so full-bodied and fully formed from the very beginning, and whose values were not so exquisitely self-determined. In my private quandaries about my own voice, it gave me a lot of satisfaction to connect her teeming personality to the gifts she possessed. She lived a life utterly her own, messy and self-defined, and it all fed and merged with that voice. At the end of our conversation, I couldn't help asking, Mom, was I at that party? Sure, honey. Let's see, that was 1963. All you kids were born then. I sighed wistfully. Somewhere in the blackout of early childhood, I had had an encounter with Patsy Cline. I may spend the rest of my life trying to remember it. When I lost my voice, I said to myself at the time, if I ever get it back, I'm going to dismantle those tapes of self-criticism, and I'm going to appreciate it. And I did get it back, and I did dismantle them, and it was like meeting a friend in middle age who you had met in your youth but grown apart from. And it's been full of great light and joy for me since. So I grew up Catholic. I hope are there any really devout Catholics here? Oh, okay. I really respect you. Let me just say that first. I've gone a different direction, but each to his own. My mother was a devout Catholic for her entire life, which was one reason that divorce was so utterly painful to her, because back in the 60s, you just didn't do that. And I wrote about that in the book as well, a little bit about my Catholic upbringing and about seeding my future from childhood as a songwriter before I even realized I was doing it. The word contrition comes from the Latin word for bruise or grind, a derivation that makes perfect sense to me as a former Catholic. Something in the drone and the rhythm of the act of contrition through my fault, through my most grievous fault, which I said to a man behind a screen in a dark confessional booth for so many years, was uniquely compelling. It took me many years to realize it wasn't my fault or even my grievous fault, however much I was drawn in by the swing of the words and the safe intimacy of confession. What all those anxiously droned acts of contrition chiefly accomplished was to break me down, bruising my sense of self permanently. Or so I thought. In any case, they had the immediate effect of making me withdraw from the truth about myself for a very long time. The truth about me, as it turned out, was unacceptable, not only to Catholicism, but to adults in general. The truth about me was not meant to fit into the system of convent school, religion, contrition, or punition. None of that mattered. I was a writer. It would save me. One day in 1990, after I had finished my album Interiors and was beginning to write the songs for The Wheel, I went to my file cabinet and aimlessly pulled out a folder of papers my mother had recently sent me of my artwork, homework, and spelling lists from the 7th grade. Leafing through them, I came upon an English project I had done on metaphors and similes. Reading the piece, I vividly remembered the excitement I had felt on being given this particular assignment, for it was the very first time in my entire career as a student that I had been excited about anything the nuns had ever asked me to do. I read through my discussion of metaphors and similes, and I could feel the thrill of my 12-year-old self coming off the page, a nascent writer in love with language, as if language were a potential lover. I came to a single page that said, in big letters I had printed very, very carefully, "A lonely road is a bodyguard." It was a metaphor I had invented. I was pleased with myself for having chosen this powerful image. It's pretty powerful. Over the more straightforward simile, a lonely road is like a bodyguard. Who's here? Here's the cogent point. I lifted that sentence from my 7th grade project and put it directly into a song I was writing, Sleeping in Paris. It went like this. I'll send the angels to watch over you tonight, and you send them right back to me. A lonely road is a bodyguard if we really want it to be. That song ended up on The Wheel. And whenever I hear it now, or think of it, or sing it, I nod to my little girl self. And she, in the wisdom of her great distance and perspective, looks on with pleasure and the patience of one who has waited a long time to be noticed. This one line in this one song is how I know who I am and how I know I survived. Thank you. I'm making this up as I go along tonight. I haven't done it like this any of the nights on this book tour, so bear with me if I stumble around. I resisted my family legacy for a long time, longer than was graceful, really. Because my father cast such an enormous shadow, and I was in the same field, I do know that it would have been worse if I had been a boy. But I pushed away, and I wanted to find out who I was separate from him, separate from this tremendous legacy of music, which I loved, but I wanted to know who I was apart from it. That's normal. Young people in that developmental stage push away from their parents. They want to know who they are. What do I do well? Who am I in this world apart from this family? And like I said, I probably did it a little longer than was necessary because it became a knee-jerk reaction. I had had 10 number one records, and I was still going, no, 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 you know, or having a little chip, you know, when they said, wanted to talk about my dad, or when my dad was the first thing people noticed about me, or tried to look through me to see my father. In the last years of my father's life, it started to seep away. There's this transfer of power between an ailing parent and an adult child, and it's a very bittersweet time of life. But the year before he died, I recorded this duet with him called September When It Comes, and I want to read a little bit about that. While driving on the Long Island Expressway in a haze of anxiety about my dad, who was then suffering yet another health crisis, I had written the lyrics to September When It Comes and put them in my purse. Eventually, that piece of paper found its way to the third floor of our brownstone, where John picked it up. John is my husband. I didn't read about him before, but he's my husband and musical collaborator. What is this, he asked. This is really good. He took the lyrics and wrote the melody, a mournful and exquisite piece of music. I recorded September When It Comes when we came back to the project after the return of my voice. Listening to the completed track pensively, John observed, "You really should ask your dad to sing on this with you as a duet." I demurred, and when he brought the idea up again a few weeks later, again I declined. Several months passed, and John said, "If ever there was a song or a time to do a duet with your father, this is the song and this is the time." I suddenly knew he was right. I called my dad and said, "Dad, I have this song, and I was wondering if you'd sing on it." He was silent for a moment and then said, "I'll have to read the lyrics first." I laughed and told him I'd deliver them in person. I flew to Nashville with the lyrics and the audio files, and after reading the words to the song, he nodded. "I could do this," he said quietly. He knew it was about his own mortality, about closing the door on the past, about what can never be resolved, only endured. We went over to the cabin in the woods near his house where he had his recording studio, accompanied by my brother, John Carter, who would record Dad's vocal. Dad clearly wasn't feeling well at all, so I gave him an out. "Dad, you don't have to do this. We can do it another time." "No," he said firmly, "I want to try it." As he learned the song, he got stronger with every take. I stood listening on the other side of the glass of the vocal booth, tears rolling down my face. We recorded 3 separate takes, and then he said, "You take that back to New York, and if John says it isn't good enough, I'll do it again." "It's good enough, Dad," I told him, laughing. "I promise you." When Al Gore spoke at Dad's funeral on September 15th, 6 months after the record was released, he mentioned the song in his eulogy and its strange prescience. "It's September," he intoned, and nodded at me. I think that would be a good time to sing that song. I am my own roadie. I got it. Don't worry about it. Been doing this a long time, but you could turn on the mic. And I believe you're auctioning this guitar off tonight, right? Actually, we're doing it on eBay. On eBay. That's on the internet machine, right? So it's not my guitar, so I'm going to get familiar with this new instrument right now. And you are my guinea pigs. Can you hear? Is it on? Yes. There's a cross above the baby's bed, a savior in her dreams. She was not delivered then, and the baby became me. But there's a light inside a darkened room, a footstep on the stair, a door that I forever close to leave those memories there. When the shadows lengthen into an evening sun, well, first there's summer, then I'll let you in September when it comes. Plan to crawl outside these walls, close my eyes and see, fall into the heart and arms of those who wait for me. I cannot move a mountain now, I can no longer run. I cannot be who I was in a way I never was. I watch the clouds go sailing, I watch the clock and sun. Oh, I watch myself depending on September when it comes. When the shadows lengthen and burn away the past, they will fly me like an angel to a place where I can rest. When this begins, I'll let you in September when it comes. Thank you. I just realized I didn't bring my capo and pick down for the next song I was going to do. Could you bring my purse down? Do you mind carrying a woman's handbag? Thank you. Well, that's good, because this gives me an opportunity to read something I think is really important about the essential driving nature of this book and why I wrote it and why I do what I do. I was invited to, thank you, sir. And see, I carry my capo in a little pretty bag. I was invited to give the commencement address at Memphis College of Art in 1998, and they gave me an honorary doctorate. Surprise! It was so fun. But I thought a lot about what I wanted to say to these young artists who were graduating from an art college and going out into the world. And many of them would go into commercial art ventures and have to work for somebody else and try to be an artist. And I felt so much longing and passion to try to tell them that even if they did work for somebody else, to keep the impulse to art alive. And this is a little bit of what I said and what I thought for them. We all need art and music like we need blood and oxygen. The more exploitative, numbing, and assaulting popular culture becomes, the more we need the truth of a beautifully phrased song dredged from a real person's depth of experience, delivered in an honest voice. The more we need the simplicity of paint on canvas, or the arc of a lonely body in the air, or the photographer's unflinching eye. Art, in the larger sense, is the lifeline to which I cling in a sometimes confusing, dehumanizing world. In my childhood, the nuns and priests insisted, sometimes in a shrill and punitive tone, that religion was where God resided and where I might find transcendence. I was afraid they were correct for so many years, and that I was the one at fault for not being able to navigate the circuitry of dogma and ritual. For me, it turned out to be a decoy, a mirage framed in sound and fury. For me, art and music have proven to be more expansive, more forgiving, and more immediately alive. For me, art is a more trustworthy expression of God than religion. It's just for me. If any of you are really religious, you know. So I mentioned the list, and my father, is it still on? Yes? I'm used to hearing a bounce back from the house, but I'm not hearing it. This list that my father gave me was very wide-ranging, and he called it 100 Essential Country Songs, but it was really all the feeder streams that fed into country music. There was Appalachian music, folk music, protest songs, Mississippi Delta music, blues, and country. And this song that my father recorded with Bob Dylan in 1969. If you're traveling in the North Country Fair, with the winds hit heavy on the borderline, remember me to one who lives there. She once was the true love of mine. Well, if you go when the snowflakes storm and rivers freeze and summer ends, please see she has a coat so warm to keep her from the howling winds. Many times I've often prayed in the darkness of my night, in the brightness of my day. So if you're traveling in the North Country Fair, the winds hit heavy on the borderline, remember me to one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. Should I do one more? Okay. I want to leave time for a question and answer. Is my timing good? I don't have a watch up here. You're fine. Okay. I wrote this song when I was less than half as old as I am now. I was a really precocious 15-year-old. 18, 20. And my daughter released her first album last November, and she called me 2 weeks before the record came out and said, "Mom, where's my list?" I'm working on that. But this song I wrote right after Ricky Lee Jones' first record came out. I was living in Los Angeles, and I loved that record so much, and I kept thinking, it was a lot about street life. And I was thinking, there's no country song about being on the street. It's about real street life. So I wrote this. You act like you were just born tonight, face down in a memory, but feeling all right. So who does your past belong to today? Baby, you don't say nothing when you're feeling this way. The girls in the bar saying, who is this guy? They don't think nothing when they're telling you lies. You look so careless when they're shooting that bull. But you know heartaches are heroes when their pockets are full. So tell me you're trying to cure a 7-year ache. You see what else your old heart can take. Boys say, when is he gonna give us some room? The girls say, God, I hope he comes back soon. And everybody's talking, but you don't hear a thing. You're still uptown on your downhill swing. The boulevard's empty, why don't you come around? Baby, what is so great about sleeping downtown? There's plenty of dives to be someone you're not. So you're looking for something you might have forgot. Don't bother calling to say you're leaving alone. 'Cause there's a fool on every corner when you're trying to get home. Just tell them you're trying to kill the 7-year ache. And see what else your old heart can take. Boys say, when is he gonna give us some room? The girls say, God, I hope he comes back soon. Tell me you're trying to
kill the seminary to see what else your old heart could take. Boys say, when is he gonna kill us on room? The girls say, gotta hope he comes back soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm even worse at bar chords on that guitar than I am on my own, and that's saying a lot. No, my mother was terrified of singing. She just didn't do it at all.
Did you get any of your love of art and music from her? Obviously, you probably got some from your father, but did you
Yeah.
get some from your mother also?
In a very different way. She had a lot of domestic arts, and she crocheted and painted and made candy from scratch, you know. So she had these wonderfully creative things. She had a expansive sense of creativity, even though she wasn't an artist. Do you know what I mean? And that was very influential. Also, she had wonderful discipline, and I'm so happy I got that from her. Very disciplined woman. She was, like my stepmother June, who probably got it from her, a very natural performer. She didn't put a lot of drama or effort into it. She could be having a conversation with you in the wings and not break it as she walked on stage, you know. She had no stage fright. She treated performance almost like a blue-collar job. It was very, there's just no glamour to it, you know what I mean? She just kind of did her work. And that work ethic really rubbed off on me. My father had a tremendous work ethic. So did my stepmother, and so did Maybelle. And I gleaned a lot of that. I have a very good work ethic. But my favorite part of her personality is that she loved to gamble. Whenever they played Vegas or Tahoe, she would hit the slots and be down there all night. Well, my nature really was to be a solitary writer, and, you know, like I wanted to be in a room and set off depth charges in the outside world just by language and not go out there much. I've changed drastically over time. I still do that, obviously. I couldn't have written this book, but I crave collaboration. I love being part of a band. You know, sometimes it gets exhausting traveling only with men because the band is all men, the crew is all men, and manager's men, and the sound guy's men, and, you know, I get so sick of hearing about gear. But I crave musical collaboration, and it balances out nicely, you know. I can go back into this solitary life and then out into performance and work with the guys. As far as working with my husband, most of the time if we co-write, we don't do it together. I will write the lyrics, he'll write the music, I'll change the lyrics a bit to fit what he's written, then he'll change it to fit this, you know, and it'll go back and forth like that. Very seldom have we sat down in a room and done that because we're both very solitary workers in that way. And it seems to work well. His strengths are my weakness and vice versa. He doesn't write lyrics, and I don't have nearly the vocabulary on the guitar that he does. So it's a great complementary relationship, and it's very romantic. You know, that kind of creation together is the ultimate in romance to me. Did that answer your question? Okay. Well, first, I think my father's list and mine would converge at points, but then I grew up in a different generation in Southern California in the 60s, huge Beatles fan, totally influenced by the Summer of Love and all of the bands that were around that time. So I would definitely have to have Neil Young, a Neil Young song. And I've been thinking about which song it would be, you know. Is it Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, or is it not Cowgirl in the Sand, but it's something. So, you know, I take this very seriously, and it's actually driving me crazy, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Which Beatles song would I put on, you know? Who knows? But I know that one place that my dad's list and mine would converge would be the song Long Black Veil, that has to be on both. No. I can give you a little a cappella. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. Oh, I'm just a show off. No, but I love singing that song because I use my voice in a totally different way than my own songs, you know, so it's such a pleasure. Oh my gosh. This is shocking, but I don't think I have. I know I did in the 80s. I wrote a couple of songs with other women. Oh my God. I did send an email to Patty Griffin asking if she wanted to write with me. I did, I swear. And she said yes, and then our paths still haven't crossed. This is shocking. I thought that Mary Chapin and I had written a song together because we were together so much, you know, in the past, but I don't think so even then. All right, something on my bucket list, thank you. I haven't made the list public because, I mean, really because so much about my dad has been co-opted for public, even very private things about him. And he gave me this list. It was so personal, like if you were a martial arts master passing on the secret to his child. And I want to keep it for myself. I do. Thank you. I think, you know, when I'm old and about to leave the planet, I may send it to some archive. But for right now, it's still mine. Oh, thank you, sorry. Yes, at some point, yes, I'm going to do volume 2. Well, writing about my parents' deaths were by far the hardest part to revisit. And I didn't want to, but I didn't think that I could rightly leave that out of a memoir. This was too important in my life and changed so much about my life that it would have been almost dishonest not to write about it. But I took my time. I would write something, feel overwhelmed, give myself a day break, come back to it. That was hard enough, but I have to say reading the audiobook was just overwhelmingly hard, even more difficult than writing it. Because you really have to revisit it and see it in your mind to speak it and everything. So, yes, Rodney Crowell, as you probably know, I was married to for 13 years. He's a great, truly great songwriter, and I admired his songwriting before I even met him. I kind of fell in love with his songwriting and then met him at a party at Waylon Jennings' house, which I wrote about in the book, actually. And I met him at this party, and he and his friend Donovan Cowart were there, who's also a songwriter, and they sang this song they had just written called Leaving Louisiana in the Broad Daylight. And I just was flabbergasted, fell so in love with him because of that song. And he was kind of a template for great songwriting for me as well. I trusted him as a songwriter. If he wrote something, I looked to it for excellence and as a guide. But more than that, and then I found my own voice, but it was a great prototypical person to have in the house, prototypical songwriter. But more than anything, he believed in my voice, even when I didn't. He kept saying, "You're a great singer. There's something about your voice. You have to keep doing this. So many times I wanted to quit. No, I can't do it. I'm not as good as Emmy Lou. You know, if I said that once, I said it a million times. I'll never be like Emmy Lou. No, you won't. But, so he was the one that really gave me the confidence to do that. I owe him a great debt for that. Well, I experience it physically. I mean, I can feel when you know how when you stand in front of a great painting and all of your senses just start to come alive and you think about your own life and you have these kind of amorphous feelings that you can't quite pinpoint, but you're on the potential of knowing something. That feeling is what I'm always looking for. And I do always feel like I'm on the potential of knowing something great, that it's just up ahead. That thing about feeling like a beginner, I want to stay open to that and keep expanding. You know, I had brain surgery in 2007, and a good hard look at your own mortality will motivate you to finish the projects you want to finish. But a physiological after effect was that my experience of music was even more keen. It was like this veil had been lifted and everything was very acute and precious to me, and it has stayed that way. So I know if you can incrementally become more sensitive, that there's still potential for me to become even more, not feeling sensitive, but sensitive to beauty and subtlety. I think you got to stay awake, too. You got to make a conscious decision to stay awake. It's so easy to numb out. Thank you for that question, by the way. That's a good question. Lots. I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. I've read everything more than once. George Eliot, Alice Munro, just a good one, and Mavis Gallant, because both of them have such economy with language. I don't like a lot of adjectives, so I tend to gravitate towards writers who are economical and powerful. Tolstoy, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You know, like they don't need a lot of adjectives because their language is so powerful. So those are my inspirations anyway. I don't have a favorite song, favorite record I made. I had this friend who taught the history of popular music at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and we used to have this argument about evolution in artists. And I argued that artists did evolve, and he said they absolutely didn't, that there were only phases and stages in an artist's life and work. As I've gotten older, I've come to his point of view more. And I look at each record as a different stage of my life, of my, where I was as a writer, the themes I was thinking about. I even think, was I pregnant then? You know, I did that vocal when I was 7 months pregnant. So that's the way I relate to records, not, oh, this is my best work. They're all different. What was the second question? Oh, songwriter. Well, I wrote about this in the book. Linda Ronstadt had this great quote once that was kind of life-changing for me. She said, to refine your skills so you can support your instincts. And that has meant the world to me because, you know, I had some dreamy idea when I was young that if inspiration hit you, that was enough. It's never enough. If you don't have discipline to support it and your skill set, it's wasted. And that is what I have spent my life doing, is like a watchmaker, just the detail work, turning the lines over, editing, rewriting, keeping my head down and showing up. That's basically it. Oh, that story is in the book about borrowing from my future, right? Well, the story is, and if you read the book, you'll see it, is that I was driving on a road and I was 8.5 months pregnant, and it was an icy night, and we came upon a man who had been killed by a car. He was on the street. There was nothing we could do. There was an ambulance there and other people, and we went on further, and this woman was marching up the road, And we said, "Ma'am, do you need a ride?" And she said, "My husband was out for a walk." And we took her back up there, and we both knew, and we didn't say anything, and she got out of the car, and I heard these keening screams coming out of her. And I said that I had to borrow from my future that night because I was carrying a baby, and I didn't want that adrenaline and shock and fear and grief to just surge through me and go into the baby. So I use that phrase, borrowing from my future. When I have the circumspection to feel this, I will feel it later, but I can't do it now. So I actually said I borrowed with interest because, you know, if you delay feeling something, it gathers steam by the time you get there. I think that's what I was talking about on the show. I wish they could read it, because I know they'd be proud of me, but I couldn't have written it when they were on the planet. There's just such a bittersweet conundrum in that. And I mean, there were even things I left out that because I didn't want to hurt people. You know, my mother's sister is still alive. One of my father's brothers and one of his sisters are still alive. There were things I could have said about their parents or, you know, my mother's parents that I withheld saying because I didn't want to hurt them. And I think that's entirely appropriate and has an integrity not to hurt people intentionally when you know it would. And leaving it out didn't change my story. And I had no interest in being bitter or blaming people or doing a celebrity tell-all, you know, kiss and tell. One guy complained in a review that it appeared as if I'd only had sex with 2 men in my life. It's like, how do you know that's not true? How do you know? But yes, I wish they could read it, but I couldn't have written it while they were here. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.